Adhikara Suraga, Takada Batasgani, Sendalares, Kalom Pipiro, Muyen de Beara, right, Yapangwe, authority, Lopangwe, prerogative, Goba and Queen Anna, Salary Sulu Bare. Ubadi Ya Dasia met Mosaga, John, Nelly, some Majin Abono. Yamanaga and Nangachini Jala, Lumusiba Chini Jala, Lotomalo Bolagane, Tama Ludiasi Mabono, Lotomalo Bolan, two a Gaunema Bora, the Sayoma, Loloni went there. Yagomaso lady, Shuniman Sayo, Barunia, Tibama Loni, do you look at Baby, Mianisi Jabono? Ada, General Tamizina, Paja, all of you, Pide Lutin level.
Greetings to you all. I like to think of Insight Myanmar podcast as a community platform. This community includes everyone behind the production, as well as the incredible guests we welcome on, and also encompasses the tens of thousands of listeners like yourself tuning in from all around the world. In essence, this production is really a conversation that we're all part of. So whether we're the ones who happen to be doing the talking, listening, asking questions, or just reflecting, we hope that this community feel can foster deeper understanding, shared learning, and meaningful connections, all centered around the stories and experiences of our guests. And that begins with the conversation coming up right now. So thank you for joining us for what's ahead. For this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast, we are talking to fellow podcasters. This is a very exciting moment, I think, in Burmese media because as never before, the podcast space, the podcast medium is showing people that have something to say. And right now, Burmese people have a lot to say, that the podcast medium is a way to say it. It's a way to speak as it's been around the world and in other countries and cultures. It's a way to have your voice and your message and your background portrayed and to reach an audience about sometimes niche topics that aren't given the same attention, and to go into the kind of detail and creativity and critical analysis that one wants, including sensitive conversations that take a bit more care and consideration in bringing. And that is the conversation we're going to have today. We are talking to two Burmese podcasters who have put a lot of work and effort into the podcast that they've been developing. It's in Burmese language, so those Burmese listeners or those that can understand Burmese are encouraged to go and check this out. And they're going to be talking about why they decided to get into the podcast space, what they're hoping to do with their podcast platform, and generally how the podcast medium is taking off in Myanmar spaces, which is something that we definitely hope to see much more as a medium that is used and encouraged, especially at this time. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to my guests and invite you to introduce yourselves and also the name of your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Paintab, and everyone, Minglava. This is Paintab. So we are running a podcast which is called Adhikara. Adhikara is a Sanskrit language. It is a Sanskrit word which means rights or authority or prerogative or something. So I really admire Pali words and Sanskrit words, and I'm also passionate about human rights. So this is why I choose that name intentionally. But I have a responsibility when I meet other guys. This is not a Buddhist podcast. So this is Sanskrit word, and it's also interesting to find out some meaning and some interpretation and variants of that word in some other belief and some other religions. For example, I'm not very sure if if Buddhism accepts everyone has rights, or I don't know, because sometimes Buddhism say many Buddhist people say in Buddhism you have no self, there is no one, so like that. So it's interesting to explore how meaningful and how words play in our world. So I'm really glad to be here with my friend and my colleague Morgan. So yeah, okay, Morgan.
Yes, I am Morgan. So as Paita said, we work at the same team, Adhikara. But he is Paita is the podcast, one of the podcast hosts. I don't appear in the podcast episode because I work in the media and communication team. I have graphic design, editing, social media, and technology stuff at the background. So nice to meet you all. I'm Morgan.
Yeah, and great to get that introduction from both of you, and just from that very brief discussion into who you are and what you're doing. So many questions emerge from that, which we'll use the rest of the episode to get into and explore. I think first is just touching back to what we looked at as the podcast space and the Myanmar podcast space. If you can talk about how you would characterize the Burmese podcast space at this present moment, and why, given the message and the content you wanted to explore, why you chose the podcast medium as the means to want to use to be able to continue this exploration of the topic.
So I am an active listener to podcasts and since before the coup in Burma. So now I used to listen podcasts, so many podcasts, especially I love organic chit chat rather than organized ones like today. So I really prefer that. So because when you are listening to a podcast, it's like reading a book written by your random writers. You don't know who is it. You don't know what they are sometimes. So, but you can imagine how that person, how that podcaster is. So it is really exciting. I really find it interesting. So one coup happened in Burma. So we made all of the possible things to promote and protect human rights. But what I realized is, as a human rights trainer who organized more than 100 sessions around the country, so I was really depressed and disappointed with all of the trainings I made. This is not because of the participants. This is because of my unexpected experience after the coup. So I stopped all of the training sessions, and I was working on the other cases, other subjects to contribute in the revolution. But at the time, I'm also thinking about a new and unique way to not teach, to share human rights content. This time it must be very in-depth and very intellectual, I think. So I got an idea to make a podcast. So in podcast you can talk a lot and everyone might not listen to you, but the people, the audience who is really interested in that specific subject will be exactly listening to you. So I understand, because I intentionally find some podcaster sometimes when I have leisure time, when I stay alone. I really try to find more podcasts which are relevant with my subjects and with my interests. So this is why I courageously decided to start a podcast. So another one is it is also a relief for me. So when I was very disappointed with organizing trainings, but it gave me many courages, many new ideas to talk about that. So after that, I met Morgan. So we have been friends since, I think we knew each other for a long time, but we did not work very closely before the coup. So after the coup, we met, and he is also a podcaster, I think, and he also talked in the other podcast series and some political podcasts and other podcasts. So I think at the time our medium, especially news information platform and medium, is shrinking because of the coup and because of the other sectors, other external factors. For example, like funding for the media organizations and the socio-economic impact on the people's life, including me. So, but running a podcast is not very expensive. It can cost a little, and you can do it in very, very minimalist way. So, and you can also, if you want to teach or if you want to educate, you can also tell everyone wherever you want to talk the subject is. So I decided to make a podcast. And at the time, I think many Burmese people are getting more interested in podcasts because we have very limited sources online for the human rights content. So, for example, like human rights topic and other strike comedies like that. So people get more and more interested in podcasts. So I'm really, really glad that. Yeah.
Like Paita said, the Adhikara podcast, the human rights podcast are so in-depth discussions with the rights experts, and so I think why I like the podcast is like convenience. It is very convenient to listen to a podcast. So the in-depth discussions with the about the human rights, something like that. So it will take time, and it takes a lot of focus to read a book or to watch a movie. But listening to the podcast is very convenient. You can work on other things, and you can play it in the background. You can still hear, and you can work meanwhile. So it doesn't take another extra time to listen to podcast. You can listen to the conveniently. So what the times are very difficult, and if you have to read very serious books, it takes time. But listening to the podcast is very convenient, I think. So that's why I choose that podcast medium. Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned that you have given over 100 trainings in human rights. So this is a very important subject in the world, particularly important and relevant in Myanmar, and the depression or the shock, helplessness that you felt after the coup, all of this work that you had done, and yet still this happens, and yet now human rights, knowledge of human rights is needed now more than ever before. And so you have had to adjust, actually, as have I. This is another area of commonality we can talk about, going from being a trainer to a podcast host, and the kind of skills that are involved in making that shift, as well as where training skills and training methodology, in my case, I can talk at length about how my methodology and background as a trainer plays directly into the kind of safe space and conversation and communication, active listening, everything else that I aim for in podcast conversations. It flows right into it. But for you, I'm wondering, as a human rights trainer, you're addressing the same topic. You're addressing human rights instead of addressing human rights in live, in-person training sessions with participants in front of you. You're addressing human rights on a podcast forum, a conversation that is then recorded and broadcast later to a captive audience. So in what ways were you treating this subject matter and taking a familiar subject matter, but what shifts did you have to do in moving from the training room to the podcast studio? And where were you able to pick up on ways that you carried it as a trainer that you found were applicable and relevant for a podcast host as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really want to talk about that. Actually, I have three aims to make a podcast. One is because of like I said before, because of the shrinking space in Burma and online, to share human rights content and then other rights-related information. So number one is that, and number two is, and this is also about a little bit background. I'm also a linguistic person, so I'm really passionate about language and how language works. In my opinion, we need to translate a lot of content, especially human rights content, from English to many languages in our country. So because language is one of the limitation for the many people because of their identity. Like some people even cannot understand Burmese, which is a lingua franca in every different religious and ethnic group in Burma. So we need to talk about the language too. So the third one is it is about the intellectual revolution. When it comes to a revolution, we also need to make an intellectual revolution. Like sometimes we need to deconstruct some of the outdated social values. Like because in Burma it is a patriarchy, and patriarchy and chauvinism is quite high, and people have such outdated ideas sometimes. So in this revolution, we see unprecedented cases and unprecedented scenario of the very young generation. For example, they make their traditional wearing of the women, Burmese female, as a flag in their strike. So which is the deconstructing the outdated idea. So I have three main objects. So one is to expand and to ameliorate the springing media space for everyone who wants to promote human rights knowledge. Number two is language. So this is why we focus on the Burmese language especially, because I don't speak other ethnic minority language. I only speak Burmese and a little English. But we focus on the Burmese, and at the same time we are trying a new way and trying some possible way to translate some of the Burmese content into other ethnic minority languages. But now we use Burmese as a main communication language for the every guest speaker, and we also use Burmese in our discussion. I think we should use, this is because of Maw Nwei and Morgen. They gave me advice. So sometimes in the past I used English for a language for the discussion, but they gave me a very precious advice. We should use Burmese as a main communication language for the audience because we are airing that in Burma. So I really respect their advices. So I made that. So that one is very quite challenging for me, because even though I was organizing many in-person trainings, I have many live interaction, I have many participants, but the one problem is it is organized training, so I cannot talk a lot about the philosophical value I admire and other intellectual stuff, like for example how we define human in the history of the philosophy, like how Thomas Hobbes defined human, how John Stuart Mill define human, like that. We cannot talk at the training because our training are very limited and very short. So at the training we have to follow the module. But in the podcast, I can say everything I want to talk, and I can share, and I can also invite some selected guest speakers for the philosophical talk. So this is, I think, a smooth transition from a training to the podcast session. And I also, running a podcast also gives me some courage to go back to the training too. So which means I'm now organizing training back now for some specific people and some groups. Yeah.
Right. Why do you think at this time it's so important for the Burmese community to have a better understanding of what human rights are?
I think this is the best time for the Burmese people to talk about human rights, because if we do it a bit earlier, people might not be very interested. For example, I did a lot of human rights education before the coup, and people only focus on their daily life, and they got a very good government. They voted in the election. They described the government they like. This is the people's government. So when I talk about the human rights issue related to the government, even the people sometimes did not like it. So if we do it later, that will be also a little bit over time, because I think this is a time people get frustration and they are very angry about the coup. This is not because they understand all of the politics thing in the country. This is what they are feeling, that their power was robbed by the armed military. So they are very eager and hungry to listen about what is human rights, how the military junta is ruining and destroying their intrinsic human rights. So this is the best time for us. I think, but this is also limited time because time is also always going. Time is passing all the time. So we have to be very careful about that. So now I think it has been about 3 years. So people's moods and people's emotion and their desires are changing, but not in a negative way. It is that changing, like in the nature. It is because of its natures. So I think people are stay very focused and very straightforward to the revolution. They are stay determined and they are stay focused. But we have to use that time very, very effectively and very carefully to make sure people get the human rights knowledge from all of the possible avenues.
Right. Yeah. So the issue of human rights in Burma and the linguistic choices that one can make in taking an English term, which also carries the political meanings behind it, translated into Burmese, this has been long a topic of hot debate and conversation. We had Elliot Pressey-Freeman on the podcast before, and he talked at length about the complexity of trying to translate human rights into Burmese and the choices that one might make of having it, often it gets translated as a privilege or an opportunity or a responsibility, and often rights are seen as finite and seen as that they're not enough to go around, and you have to grab your rights for yourself or your community so the next fellow or the next community over doesn't take them away from you because there's a limited number of them. And so this is an excellent moment, and I would encourage listeners to go back and hear that interview with Elliot Pressey-Freeman, as well as to read the book that came out this year, Rights Refused, which is going into that subject and more in much more detail. But also it's a great time to check in with you about because you're so keen on the issue of human rights as well as these linguistic considerations. So if you could break down a bit the choices that you've made in how you first translate human rights into Burmese.
Yeah, it was very, very controversial thing, but not very negative, not in negative way, but people always argue about the Burmese translation of human rights. So in Burmese, most people say Lut Khuen Ye. Lut means humans, with apostrophe. Humans are rights, Khuen Ye means rights. So Khuen Ye is literally saying opportunity. So some specific organizations, for example, Myanmar, so they use the term Lut Ya Bai Wen. Ya Bai Wen means inherent right. It is intrinsic and inherent right. So I think Ya Bai Wen, that term is stronger and more, I think, more meaningful. But I do not want to change the people's desire to stick on the original and older version of the human rights translation, because we have the official Burmese translation of human rights declaration in Burma. But the problem is we do not only have trouble with the definition of human rights. We also have the full definition of the human rights declaration. For example, Article 16 says you have a right to marriage. But from my understanding, the original English text does not mention gender. It says spouse. Everyone or every person or spouse. But in Burmese translation, it says groom and bridegroom, like that. So people think, oh, human rights differentiates men and women gender. So people only think only heterosexual people can marry. So this is a problem, I think. So this is why I started to translate some of the rights related documents and texts. But this is really, really time consuming, and we are just a young team, and our team is busy all the time. We always overwhelmed with the text. So we are doing very steadily and slowly. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. So, so in your podcast, as you break down the philosophy of human rights and you're talking beyond the Burma context, do you use the English word human rights in your Burmese language podcast, or do you land on different Burmese definitions and terms different ones at different places depending on the context.
Yeah, I use Lu Ya Bai Nguyen and also Lu Kuen Ye because some people are not very comfortable to call it Lu Ya Bai Nguyen. They are very, they stick to the OO, and so I use both. But personally, I prefer Lu Ya Bai Nguyen, which is more meaningful, and it is, I think it really reflects the English word, human rights in Burmese.
I think just the conception of what human rights are, the fact that human rights exist, that you can have them, that someone else can have them, that you can insist on them, that you can recognize when human rights are violated, and by knowing what they are, you also know when they're violated or when you or your people might be violating those of others. I also think there's something about the psychology of human rights that's modern, because going back historically in any country, in any civilization, the sense of development of a consciousness of what rights were, well, that fit into different definitions of monarchy and cosmology and religion and all of these other things, that you didn't necessarily have your own individual right above and beyond what the society or the religion or the order expected of you. And so there's something in the development in human society where the psychology starts to take on this insistence and this understanding that, I actually, however the society wants to arrange itself, I do have a baseline of human rights that I have to insist upon. And so I wonder where upon Burma's trajectory, as if you can comment on something about the psychological process of where the society has come from and where it is now, of the understanding, how the understanding pervades and how it exists of, well, wait a second, human rights do exist. They exist for me, they exist for my neighbor, they exist to someone in a different religion, a different region, a different ethnicity, a minority.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I recently organized a training for some group of people. So they asked me a question at the end of the training. This is not a question, it's like a comment. So someone say, I think she's a CDM. She's a CDM, former civil servant. So she said, are we focusing too much on human rights rather than other values like that? So she said, so we should think about what we are doing and where we are in terms of the human rights. And when we are focusing on the rights, we might be sometimes extreme. So she said, so you know what? She said that at the end of the training, after 3 days, so I was a bit, are you serious like that? So, but like I said before, and this is a Burmese Buddhist society, so we were taught we have no ego. We have ego. Ego makes us imagine and rights. Ego makes us think we have right. So we have body, we have self. Ego makes us like that. Mm-hmm. So, and we also have Asian value. So we have to think about the benefit of our family, our community, and you have to do more and more for the benefit of the society rather than yourself. So you don't think about yourself. And if you don't think about yourself, you will gain the positive consequence of your effort.
Sure.
Today.
Yeah.
So we in our normal, I think from my understanding, in our normal daily life and daily opinion, we don't think too much about human rights. And sometimes when we say rights, so it's a little bit something challenging. So when we are talking about rights, and I think psychologically we are constructed as we have I, but I is not us. I is another person. I is another being. We are like imagining, we are thinking. So when I have a right, this is not my right, and like that. So I think it impacts on the people perception on the human rights. But I think now people are now aware of and they accept the acknowledgement of the human rights, and I think more people truly believe in human rights more and more, I think.
It's interesting to contrast the ideal of human rights to Buddhist faith, and of course in living in Southeast Asia. And one of the criticisms that has been launched with human rights activists that have come specifically to Southeast Asia is, these are Western values. You're trying to impose your values onto our traditional society, and usually it's the patriarchy or the authority that's trying to assert their traditional nature that they don't want impacted, of course, because they have privilege. But I think it's also very good to check in with people from those societies and to inquire the human rights methodology, much of which has been formed and matured in the West, and certainly we're not perfect by any means when it comes to human rights, but at least these values and how they've been articulated. To what extent do you find that there's a real universal quality how these formulations of the philosophy of human rights can come and be applied in Burma? And to what extent do you feel as a human rights activist that there are some conceptions that might have to be adjusted or modified as they integrate into your native culture?
Yeah, I think human rights has been popular in Burma in a very, very short time. Since about, I think, the so-called quasi-civilian government. So people are aware of the human rights, and it became popular. So, but one thing I understand is it is also about your empathy, and it's also about your experience. So in Burma, so I met so many people. They're not very interested in human rights, but when it comes to the coup and when it comes to the human rights violation, they do experience human rights violations. So and then they try to accept that. But I think this society, Burmese society, have some taboo. Even though when we are talking about the human rights, they still have taboo ideology. And so for example, blasphemy. So you cannot talk about any criticism of the religions in country, but and it is also a criminal offense, and the people might be not very, very welcome. So this is a problem we are still managing to tackle. So I think many of the human rights activists in Burma they do a lot of things to educate and promote and protect human rights. But my understanding is we need a very, very philosophical revolution. I think because I want the human rights to be nurtured in Burmese society in Burmese context. Because I simply do not think we have a great industrialized revolution in the past. Because we became the colony of British government in 1885, and we got independence in the 1947, and we became from a province of India into a country direct control under the British government in 1937. So let's say we lived under a monarchy, totalitarian monarchy for more than 7 or 8 centuries. So we were very, very afraid of monarchy, and that owns even our life. In Burmese, we say "Ta'u Sambai," which means from your head to your life. So monarchy owns everything. So Burmese society lived with that under that monarchy for many centuries. And then strange people came to our country, and we were ruled by another country, another government. And then when they went back, they give it state, they give it constitution, they give it rights. But I do not think this is not a very smooth transition from a society to a state. Not only Myanmar, in Southeast Asia, I think many other countries, many other society experience like that. I mean, because they were just a small Mandela under the kingdom and monarchy, and then the colonizer came, colonized them, and then when they went back, they give them state and constitution and system, like federal or democracy. And I think we have a genuine transition from any system to a true democracy. So I think this that watershed moment is now. So people experience human rights violation, people experience the military regime, which we were taught by our older generation in our childhood, how cruel the military regimes were in the past, but we did not experience. Now we do. Now we do experience. And I think this is very, very effective, I think, stimulation to the transition for the Burmese society from a situation to a truly democratic society. I think we are now transitioning into democracy. But I understand we have a lot of tragedy. We lost so many lives, including some of my relatives and some of my family members. But yeah, everything costs. Yeah.
Touching upon the issue of human rights in the transition period, I think that one of the disappointments that some had in looking at the transition, and maybe many would even go as far as to say failures, is the Rohingya crisis.
Yeah.
And what greater violation of human rights can you find than a genocide? And I think what was particularly troubling for many people was that on one hand you had Burmese Buddhist practitioners, meditation teachers, monks, nuns that seemed to exemplify the noble path of what the Buddha was teaching, that were suddenly not calling out the genocide for what it was not, even as they were speaking about their own concerns or their own country, there was no metta in what was being said about the suffering that was being heaped on the Rohingya, which even if you have your own political opinions, they could be expressed with metta for the compassion and the suffering of others. That was empty and non-existent in other places. For many Buddhist practitioners, foreign friends of mine, that was something that was very upsetting and confusing and disturbing. And I know many long-time foreign Buddhist practitioners, including monastics, who left the country because it simply became too difficult for their practice to be in monastic and Buddhist settings where that they had always admired, where suddenly there was greater Rohingya talk. I'm remembering one guest who said that at one point she was looking at the local Buddhist magazine or circular that the monastery had put out updated on the activities, and there suddenly started to be hateful speech towards the Rohingya in this magazine that was supposed to be about the Buddhist teachings. I've also spoken to people in the political sphere mentioning how these longtime 88 generation and democracy activists, people have been imprisoned by this military, that they knew more than anyone about the suffering they had gone through in this dictatorship, that they were really not speaking out for the Rohingya, and quite the opposite. There was not much daylight between them and the military clearance operations that were taking place. And so you have this curious situation where the Buddhist practitioners, and we don't want to paint too general of a picture, of course there are many exceptions to this, but there was a case where there were human rights activists and Buddhist practitioners that were Burmese that were seeming to not stand on the right side of history and not understand or speak for the genocide and the trampling of human rights and atrocities and human suffering that was taking place.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not a Buddhist, and my answer will not represent Buddhist people. So, and another one is I want to start with this conversation is Rohingya is a very, very tough question for many people in Burma, including some politicians, veteran politicians, some activists, some authors, some writers, some even intellectual people. We as long as we think. So it is so when we talk about Rohingya, we also say Rohingya. When you want to measure a person's perception, so you give him or her Rohingya issue.
Right.
So this is a little bit, I think, a frustration and a bit confusing because Buddhism says peace. And I was a Buddhist, and I came from a Buddhist family, so I know so much about Buddhism as a layperson. So Buddhism says peace, and karuna, and compassion, and even the ubhika. Ubhika means like, I think you know too much about ubhika. So no attach, no detach.
We can, for listeners who don't know, we can translate it as equanimity or balance of mind.
Yeah, equanimity. So which means, I'll explain a little bit as much as I can. So which means you do not have any arrogance, or you do not have any anger to the people who hate you, and you do not have any attachment to the person who admire and love you too much. So you give the same compassion and same loving kindness to everyone who treats you in different ways. This is called equanimity, ubhika. So Buddhism teaches people so many kinds of ways to live a peaceful and pacifist and calm life, and to share your compassion with other people. But the Buddhist people, the Buddhist practitioners in the country which is always described as a Buddhist country, I think their responses are a little bit confusing, and also sometimes a little bit, it makes me angry sometimes. But I understand, I always try not to blame the society, because we lived under a very, very strict and very cruel military regimes, one by one. I mean, successive military regimes, and our education system was very poor, and that did not give us a chance and did not give us critical thinking. So we are always ready to take something when someone's with our mother or our respected person, someone gives some idea to us. We did not criticize that. We accept that exactly. This is like our habit, or this is like our daily life. And even the Burmese Buddhism and military Buddhism are not very same. And a friend of mine quite that time, and informally, military Buddhism. I think there is military Buddhism in Burma. This is not like the real Buddhism says. So it's like you make donations all the time, and you kill people, and you won't get to hell, like that. So I think many of the, in my opinion, this is just a stereotype, and this is a generalization. In my opinion, many Buddhist practitioners may believe some military Buddhism at some way, one way or another in the past. But now, I don't know, I think we should conduct a research a survey on how Buddhist practitioners have changed during the year about their social value and their social justice. For example, in the past, when I was young, when I was a child, many teachers, many old people, elderly, they say, if I say something unlike in school, I was bullied by another bigger guys, and they say, this is your karma, because you made something, you bullied someone in your past life. So there is no social justice for us in real life.
I see.
This is a problem. So when we see something suffering, even that time, even at the moment, some people still believe that. Some people still grab that ideology. So in some of my trainings, some of my participants say, oh, we are experiencing very, very bad suffering because of the military, because we make very bad things to people in our past life. Oh, I don't think so. I say in my mind. So one of our guest speakers, a Buddhist monk, he said, I like one thing. He said, I like too much that. He said, okay, Buddhism accepts karma. Buddha also accepted karma. So, but there is one thing you can do. Like, for example, now Morgen and I are sitting, and I punch Morgen on his face. And okay, if someone thinks this is because of the Morgen's past life, and Morgen bullied someone in his past life. So if I knew that, so I can cut the stream of karma in this life.
Yeah.
This is for the social justice. Rohingya issue is, I think, the way the Buddhist practitioners in Burma, I think they are a bit changing, and I think social value and their belief system in their social justice, I think a little bit changing.
So that's a good answer of tackling what Buddhist practitioners, how they might look at and understand social justice and Rohingya and trying to tackle those complicated topics. How about human rights defenders, 88 generation? democracy activists, anti-military activists as well, there was some dismay along with others that when the Rohingya crisis happened, that there were those who had always seemed to stand against the military that suddenly was not standing so much against the military when it came to the Rohingya, and suddenly was not speaking out for the Rohingya the way that they spoke out for themselves and some of the other ethnic minorities that were in the country. And so what was your take on that?
Yeah, I think this is because of the politics and because they are politicians. We are not very sure we know the true version of them. So maybe they use the what, they play with the what in terms of the Rohingya, because they knew, I think I believe politicians know at least the general behavior of the Burmese people, because they're politicians. They know better than us. They know better than we do. So if they do something about minority or vulnerable and unrecognized communities in Burma, maybe they were got some backlash or outrage from the. This is about the previous circumstance before the coup. I think this is about that. So they might be aware of that. So we were got very negative feedback from the population, and we were not win in coming elections. So they got silent.
There might be some truth in that, but I think there's also truth in the understanding that politicians are leaders that don't have to always respond to public opinion. They can also shape public opinion. And I think that one of the real dangers that we've seen with Trump in America is that as a leader, as a political figure, he is saying things to the masses that are becoming very dangerous in our country, because he's saying things that are very irresponsible and that are, maybe they're reading the public mood, but they're also pouring gasoline on the public mood as well, where you think of, if you contrast Trump with some of the previous Republican leaders that would, I'm thinking most famously John McCain, when there was this has been quoted in so many different places, but there was a town hall where, when he was running against Obama, where someone suggested that Obama wanted to destroy America, that he wasn't good for the U.S., that he all these controversies, that he was secretly a Muslim or whatever else it was. And John McCain responded by saying, no, he's a decent man. We have very different versions of and visions of what we want for America, but he's a decent man who also wants to help this country, but I think I can help it better than him, and here's why my policies will work. And that's always quoted as a very noble and very laudable act of being able to say, yes, we're competitive, we're running against each other. I think that my platform is better for the country than his, but he's not trying to destroy the platform. I'm not going to tear him down. And he's saying this to his own supporters. So that's a moment in history where rather than responding to that public opinion and pouring gasoline on it, there was actually a decision to reroute and redefine that public opinion for what was better for civil society and for democracy. That for John McCain in that moment, he very much showed and proved that democracy in America was more important than his campaign and his person, that the system was more important than any one person, including himself. And so I think that's also an argument that can be made when we're looking at this, and when we're not just talking about politicians, we're also talking about journalists and authors and activists and former political prisoners and others, that it seemed that this touched a nerve that caused those that have been advocating for certain freedoms all their life to suddenly say, well, those freedoms were never meant for those people. We were always talking just about this side of the divide and not so much those. And I think that confused a lot of observers, a lot of longtime observers and allies. And I think, and the reason why I'm spending more time talking about this is because I wonder to what degree this points at, again, the psychology of human rights, the understanding of inherent human rights, innate human rights, and to what degree that concept is being understood in what's been a long, repressive, and closed environment in Burma.
I think that in this moment, we have people believe we have a legitimate government. We have some new leaders in the new situation of new challenging condition of Burma. So, and I truly believe the figures and leaders of a country can shape the people's opinion. For example, I will give you an example. It is about the Unicode. So before that, in the past, most of the Burmese people used only Zoji, which is not supported in international Unicode. But when the NLD got power and Daw Suu, so she promoted that idea, and she told to everyone, please use Unicode. As far as I remember, she also shared some of the positive effects of the using Unicode, which is called Pidao, which means union. It's very political. So I simply think people followed her instruction to use Unicode in a very, very short time. This is not because they knew the positive effects of that. They love her. This is bad because they love her. So I think, and in Burmese opinion, in Burmese way, many people believe governments are parents. And they always say, when they make a comparison between the military regimes and the democratic governments, they always say, we are living under a parent-like government now. So please do not make any riot that can disturb our parents, like that. So when we were in military regime, it's not like that. So that is an evil, that's a monster. So whatever you do against military regime, we support you. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Any of the military regimes is good. It's bad. Any are not good. All of the military regimes are not good. They are evil and monstrous, and they're murderers. But when it comes to the civilian government, elected civilian government, we have to claim our rights, and we have to make challenges to their government, especially the figure one. But people believe they are living under very, very helpful and very good parents. So if someone wants to make something that is critical and that is challenging the opinion and instructions of the government, they don't like it. So I think it is like the charismatic figure, the cultural mascot is very, very, I think it stays firmly rooted in the Burmese society. Even at this time, very, very critical time for the Burma's future. There is a large population of Burmese people. They suppose NUG, whatever it is, and they never want to raise the question to the NUG. And even sometimes they want to, denounce, or they want to fight you. They want to argue with you when you want to make a question to the NUG. So, and I simply, I'm not a politician. I never think I'm a politician. But I'm only interested in the politics and the political philosophy. And I honestly think NUG knows that, and NUG knows that. Because recently a case happened in Central Burma. So I'm not very, very aware of the detailed information, but I knew it. A group of people organized a protest against the NUG's plan, and maybe PDF under the NUG's defense ministry. And they were cracked down by the PDF or not PDF, by the administrative unit under the NUG. And at the same time, even during the 3 years, NUG kept saying, "Hey, please participate and get involved in the people's movement, like strikes, silent strikes, or something." They always say that. But once a group of people try to protest them, they crack down that. I'm very, very sadly aware that not many people talk about that. Only some of the human rights activists and defenders only raise that issue. I really wish that culture should, I think, end. So this is really, really stay true. The politicians and the political leaders can shape the public opinion and public discourse in Burma. So why don't they want to use that opportunity to make a change in the public opinion? So I do believe some very few politicians or political leaders really, really try to use that opportunity to make a change, positive change, very, very big, crucial change. But many of the political leaders are stay floating with the trend, that trend. Yeah, that's it.
Right. I want to move to the Buddhist side of it because you referenced at the beginning your podcast name comes from a Pali word that you've also referenced where Buddhism fits into the conception of human rights and this ego, lack of an ego, becoming egoless, not attached, as well as where social justice frameworks fit in with the idea of karma and what's coming to you. Those are all very interesting topics. And I wonder where personally your own life and belief system and practice has fallen into your work as a human rights defender. You mentioned how you are influenced by the Buddhist teachings and you come from a Buddhist background, but you don't identify as a Buddhist now. So can you talk about your own background as intersecting with the Buddhist teachings, with meditation as the case may be, and where you grew out of that and where that then comes to intersect or perhaps conflict with human rights?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for passing the question. I was Buddhist and I was also a Christian too, because I'm from Kachin State and I was raised in a Buddhist family, but I was raised in a Christian community. Many of my best friends are Christian and I still have communication with them. So I was Buddhist for a long time before my teenagehood, and in my teenagehood and until my 20s, even during the 20s, I was a bit Christian. Now I don't know how to identify myself, and I think I'm like a pantheist. I follow every religion. I love them all, but sometimes there are some points I want to make an argument. But okay. But I really like Buddhism. I really like Buddhist philosophy. I mean, for example, sometimes the way I see the five like precepts is a bit different from what people see. Like, for example, many Buddhist people may believe that five precepts are the foundation for you to the path to the nirvana. For me, it is like a regulation, fundamental regulations for the people to make peace and calm within the society rather than a soteriological way. Because I have some points. I mean, for example, I love thinking. So, for example, the first regulation of five precepts is do not kill anyone. But in the scriptures, as far as I understand, it says do not kill any other living things, which means you can kill yourself. So, and I also study about the Japanese and Korean and some Bhutan Buddhism. In some way, in Japanese, euthanasia and suicide are kind of liberation rather than a sin, which is strongly found in the Burmese Buddhist society. So, and I also learned about some of the life of the Buddha before he became the last life in Buddhahood. So he committed suicide for a donation or something. So Buddhism accepts or allows you to make euthanasia or something in some way. But many Burmese Buddhist people believe suicide is a sin. Maybe they don't study Buddhism really, or I don't know. In Buddhism, it can be simply understood. You can make euthanasia for something positive way. So, if the Buddhism is let you kill yourself for some reasons, this is not about the nirvana, I think. Maybe, but it's not the priority. Mm-hmm. This is about how we should treat others in our society. And for example, Buddha once told his son Rahula, he said, do not lie. If you can lie, you can do anything. This is for the goodness of the society. This is how you should treat others in your society rather than a soteriological liberation way. This is, I simply understand, Buddhism's regulation. And I think Buddhism is very deontological. This is not about the consequence of your action. This is about the purpose of your action. You should not kill anyone. This is absolute true. You should not kill. Not because who he is, not because what he is. So to be conclusion. So what makes me so Buddhist philosophy and Sanskrit language have very influence on me. And so when I was thinking about the name of my podcast, I want to make it. I wanted to make it philosophical. I wanted to make it related rights related. I also wanted to make it significant. So this is why I chose Adhikara. But one thing I didn't expect is people are thinking about that as a Buddhist name. So I now we are trying to make an introduction video for Adhikara podcast, and we will explain that. And Morgan and another one, they will talk. I'm not talking in that video. They're gonna talk about how we started Adhikara, why we choose Adhikara, and what we are publishing under the Adhikara podcast channel.
Great, thank you for that. And I think that segues well into cycling back into where we began the conversation with looking at the podcast itself and Morgan's involvement with that as well. And perhaps a question to Morgan, looking at the podcast medium that you've developed, you're a technician behind the scenes. What ambitions or aspirations do you have for what impact you would like to see this podcast having on Burmese society and discourse?
Yes. So the Burmese community, if we say like social media, they only focus on Facebook. Not some people will go to YouTube, but not podcast medium is not popular among the Burmese people. So we want to promote that podcast culture into Burmese people. There are a lot of podcasts after the coup. We are one of them, but there are still very little people listening to the podcast. So we are trying to promote that. So in order to do that, we have to have a Facebook page. We have to have a YouTube channel. And so something like that. So even in the Facebook page, we are not very so much popular. If we promote the podcast, it is still very hard to redirect the Facebook users into Spotify or something like that. So this is quite challenging to promote the podcast culture to the Burmese people, but we're trying to redirect them into the podcast culture. So we are still trying, but even on the Facebook page, we are not successful. We are not very successful to do that. Yeah. So we are still trying that. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's wonderful to hear, and I thank you both so much for joining us and for sharing the podcast. We hope that it really does take off, and that our listeners to this who speak Burmese, understand Burmese, can go and do a deeper dive into human rights issues in Burmese language that you treat in your podcast discussions. I hope that you have many more episodes to come, many more years ahead of you.
Yeah, actually, I feel blessed to have this team because these guys are very effective, and I mean, in my life, I never imagined I am as a leader of an organization, but I organize a few organizations, but as a main supporter for our main leader. But now I am the leader. But I don't want to use that term, which is a bit strong for me. So I always use myself as a founder, and they are founder members or co-founders. So when we were talking about a podcast, he also tried to. I believe he still has that plan. 1st February 2021. Right. So we are going to talk about what did you do? What were you doing at the time? For example, for me, and on the very dawn of that day, I was writing and finalizing a research report, and I was very sleepy. So I had a lot of rumors and information about the coup. But I said with my two colleagues, my two co-researchers, I said, I don't think Burmese military were that very bloody stupid thing, but they did it. So I fell asleep about 4:30 or some time. But after 30 minutes, a friend of mine woke me up. So and then he said in very blunted way, "Hey, military made a coup." So we went around into the town. So it was like about that. So I also have that plan too. But maybe when we have a full and enough capacity and human resource, we will make it. But now this is still an idea because when we really doing and managing the podcast things, it was really time consuming, and we have to inform and notify each other. Hey guys, this is a deadline tonight, like that. So we were talking too much about podcasts, and I was thinking Morgan and I knew each other, but we did not work together, never before. But I believe he would be a good friend and good teammate in our team. So I invited him, and he voluntarily worked for us for many months before he became a paid member of our organization. So I really appreciate that in this moment too. So we became we started as a podcast only with 3 people. At the time, Morgan was just a voluntary. So he did not come and he did not walk. He stayed, sometimes he helped us when we want to make something, and he also gave suggestions. But after about a few months, I tried to make it into a repository, which includes podcast channel, multimedia content, and library, and translation team. So we will do library, and it is an online repository. But we are very at the very initial stage. So I cannot say anything about our library. We are still trying to build it, and we have very limited source, including funding, very limited source, and we have very limited human resource. We only have 6 people, but some people are working remotely, not in this town, so they are from another place. And now we expanded our organization from a podcast team into a repository in January 2024, very recently. So now we have a translation team. Now we have a media and communication team, me, Morgan, and another one. Now we also have a research and archive team. So we are running that. But the one thing ridiculous is we do not have an administrative person now. So we take administrative responsible for ourselves.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story and talking about how your podcast got started, and hopefully you guys will be around a long time, and the Burmese podcast space itself will start growing in all the exciting directions that the podcast medium allows, because it definitely is a space that brings out conversations of a nature that are hard to have elsewhere, and I think that is really exemplified by the work that you're doing in talking about human rights and the way that you're doing. So thank you again for coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you too for your time and inviting us, me and my friend, and giving us a space and condition to share what we are doing.
Thank you so much.
Since the coup, Better Burma has provided consistent humanitarian aid to vulnerable communities across Myanmar. Over time, however, we have also come to realize that another consequence of the coup is a severely collapsed economy. Trade and tourism have almost entirely evaporated, and local artisan communities suddenly found every opportunity of continuing livelihood closed off to them. To help support those artisan communities, Better Burma now brings items direct from their workshop into your home. These lovely pieces from a far corner of the world will not only light up your room or make a lovely gift for a loved one, but they'll also help dozens of artisans create sustainable businesses and livelihoods. Part of each purchase will also go towards our ongoing nonprofit mission. To see these beautiful crafts, visit alokacrafts.com. That's Aloka, A-L-O-K-A, crafts, C-R-A-F-T-S, one word, alokacrafts.com. Of course, as is your preference, you can also consider making a donation through our normal channels. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go on to support a wide range of humanitarian and media missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, refugee camps, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution to a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause in both websites except credit card. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we can take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either website for specific links to these respective accounts or email us at info@betterburma.org. That's Better Burma, one word, spelled BETTERBURMA.org. If you would like to give it another way, please contact us. We also invite you to check out our range of handicrafts that are sourced from vulnerable artisan communities across Myanmar, available at alokacrafts.com. Any purchase will not only support these artisan communities, but also our nonprofit's wider mission. That's Aloka Crafts, spelled ALOKACRAFTS, one word, alokacrafts.com. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.
Oba yarananda dayananga yaranaya dayanang boda yaranam